I'm joined now by someone who worked on two very different Tom Baker stories, but I think equally iconic. So I would like to introduce production assistant Rosemary Crowson. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And yes, well, for my age, I'm extremely well. I'm 84 now. So that's, I think I'm doing quite well, all things considered.
Certainly, yeah, certainly. And I wonder if we could start by explaining what a production assistant does.
The BBC used to like to get as much out of you as they possibly could, and a production assistant did everything. They were a first assistant director on filming. They were the floor manager in the studio. On filming, they found the locations. We used to cast all the extras. We planned all the filming. We planned all the studio, how you did it, what order you did things. We just did everything. We were in charge of everything. There were no other people to help us.
So when it comes to something like Doctor Who, is that a particularly busy show for you?
Extraordinarily busy. Yes, you know that you're probably going to have to find a quarry or sand dunes or something extraordinary that is supposed to look like something else. I mean, I remember doing a Blake 7 once at the London Brick Company, and that looked absolutely amazing. All these channels of water. Yeah, no, you did work very hard finding places to do it. Yeah.
And was that a challenge that you particularly enjoyed?
Yes, I did. I did enjoy it, and at that time we had a wonderful department which had all sorts of photographs. They had every location that everybody had ever been in, and so you could go and look up things. And I found, after doing one Doctor Who, that I suddenly realised that every location that was like that somebody had used before. So it was much better to go and look it up, and then you didn't have to waste quite so much time. Because if they hadn't been used for that, it had been used for something else.
So your first encounter with Doctor Who was Genesis of the Daleks, which is now, seen as a classic and as a very iconic story. Did it feel particularly special at the time?
Yes, it did. It did. I mean, I think even in those days, anything that had the Daleks in it for a start was just iconic. It was amazing. And I mean, once you've got the Daleks, you were in trouble. You were in real trouble because they're not the easiest things to use. But yes, it was extraordinary because I don't think anybody had ever. I didn't remember anybody ever thinking, and I was quite a Who fan in those days. I don't remember anybody ever talking about who'd invented the Daleks. Had they been invented? Were they bought? I mean, nothing like that. So it was an extraordinary script.
And as a production assistant, would you have had a great deal of contact with Terry Nation, who wrote it?
No, not a lot, because that was mostly with the director and the producer and the script editor. And I mean, sometimes we were included in what happened, but yeah, I mean, I met him several times, but yeah, no, we're not that much in touch with him, no.
And of course, that was Tom's first season as the Doctor.
Yes, it was.
How was he to work with? Was he by that point still a bit more apprehensive?
He hadn't quite settled in, but he was. He says in all the interviews that he does that he was a nomad, and he certainly. I mean, there were some nights that he actually, I think, slept in the offices in Shepherd's Bush because he had nowhere to sleep, and he was feeling his way a lot with meeting people. I remember going on. I mean, he never got cars or things like that. I remember going home on the tube with him about 2 weeks into rehearsals from North Acton. And we got on the tube and he was getting off at Notting Hill and I was going to Oxford Circus. And we got onto the tube and there were these two little schoolboys, about 10 years old, sitting opposite. And of course, enough of the Who's had gone out for them to realise suddenly who he was. And these little boys looked and they went, "Is it him? No, it's not him. Is it him? No, it's not. Is it him? Is it him? No, it's not him. Tom just sat beside me, we just sat and said nothing. And he got off the tube at Notting Hill and he went up to the window and he went, no. Like that. They went, it's him. And that's one of my favourite memories. And that was on Genesis of the Daleks. It was right near the beginning.
But of course, you had already worked with him on a play for the month. So was it quite nice to sort of pick up where you left off?
Yes, it was nice that we'd met before. I mean, he'd changed an awful lot since then. I think he'd been through quite a lot between the Millionaires and working on the Millionaires was a different. But I think it was what may have been one of the reasons why he got the job, because a director called Bill Slater directed the Millionaires, and by the time Tom was Doctor Who, he was head of serials and series. So, I think maybe he might even have suggested, but he was certainly a great, he liked Tom a lot. Tom was a stage actor and Bill had been a stage actor, and I think they just liked each other.
And you say you were something of a fan of Doctor at the time. How was it to work with the Daleks? Did it live up to that expectation?
Yes, it did. Yes, it was great fun. I have a son who now works in television, and he was about 10 years old when I did Genesis of the Daleks, and I took him in on a Saturday morning to rehearsals, which was, you're not really supposed to show any child what the Daleks really looked like. But I broke all the rules and took him in, and he was just, and the Dalek operators let him sit in the bottom half of a Dalek and push it around with his feet. Now, can you imagine 10, 11-year-old? He was just absolutely in seventh heaven. And then he went back to school, I think, on Monday and said, "You'll never guess, I've actually been in the bottom half of a Dalek."
And am I right in thinking that John Nathan Turner gave you a little bit of advice working with the Daleks?
Oh, Lordy. Yes, I hadn't been in series and serials very, very long, so I hadn't worked with the Daleks before, and he'd done loads of Who's at that point. And he said to me, "Rosie, do you know about the Daleks?" And I said, "No, what?" And he said, "Well, there's been a big row, and the scenery guys won't deal with the Daleks, and the prop guys won't deal with the Daleks. So you have to kind of look after them and make sure that the operators and everybody there is quite happy. And, and for heaven's sake, don't forget to let them out at the lunch and the supper breaks, because otherwise they'll be stuck in the Daleks and they won't be able to get out, and you'll have a problem on your hands." I said, "Oh, John, I wouldn't forget that. I would never forget to get." Of course I wouldn't. And he said, "I bet you do." And I said, no, I'll be fine. And about the second or third day of the day in the studio, all the working lights were on and everybody had gone, and I sort of stood there in the studio and just looked around to make sure everything was all right. And suddenly a little voice said, "Rosie, are you still there? Could you let us out?" And it was John Scott Martin and Simon Grant were there. And they just been stuck in there. So I had to take the tops off the Daleks, which are quite heavy, and put them on the floor and get them out. And I did forget that they were in the Daleks. So yes, he was right. He says everybody did it. That's what he said.
But was Michael Wisher perhaps a little bit more memorable, or did you still have to help him out?
He had to drink everything through a straw. You just reminded me of that. He had to drink everything through a straw. I don't think he ever took the mask off during the day. I think they had to give him, I could be wrong, but it took yonks to get that makeup and that mask done. And I have a feeling that he used to have to go to the canteen in it, probably. Yeah, I can't remember him taking it off. And certainly if he was having coffee at the coffee break or whatever, he had to drink it through a straw. So it was sort of because there was a gap here. But yes.
The sets look wonderfully atmospheric, particularly the sort of bunker of Davros and the Daleks. Were they actually quite small? Because I imagine that it was a lot of sort of clever camera angles.
I think it was clever camera angles because they weren't that small. I mean, in Doctor Who, the worst sets to deal with are the corridors. And that was warned to me by David Maloney, the director, because you've got people coming up one corridor and then you're using the same corridor for people to go down the corridor a different way. And sometimes you have to redress it so that there are different props and things roundabout so it looks like a different corridor. And when they're doing a really big chase, you're probably using the same corridor 5 or 6 times. And everybody thinks that they're coming around the corner and you're in a different corridor. It's not, it's the same corridor.
So as a production assistant, that must keep you very busy cueing actors and sort of reminding them where they are then.
Yeah, and reminding myself where I am. David had to tell me several times which end of the corridor I was supposed to be. You can get, even as a production assistant, you can get lost as to which end of the corridor you are, which corridor you're supposed to be in. You know, it's not easy, and especially when you've got lots of Daleks around you.
And so, had you worked with David Maloney before?
No. It was good fun. I both the directors I worked with on Who were just, they were both really, and David was very, very helpful to me because I'd never done it before, and it does come as quite a shock. It's not like anything else. It really is not like, I mean, it is with things that I did, like I did Blake 7 and things afterwards. It's a bit like that, but not quite. But I'd never done anything like that before.
So when you came to work on City of Death, did you approach it with sort of some idea of what was going to happen then?
Oh, but City of Death was quite different. The City of Death was like an ordinary episode of anything. I mean, it was never, it wasn't like a Doctor Who, but it was a very sophisticated Doctor Who. I mean, I think that's why, I mean, someone said somewhere that it was the best thing in that whole season of Who's. And it had the largest audience, which was partly due to the fact that ITV were on strike. But it did help that you didn't have anything good on the other side. But even so, I think people would have watched it anyway. You know, it was quite different. It was very sophisticated and very different.
And did that come from the script, or by this point, Graham Williams?
Oh yes, because Douglas Adams wrote the script, and I mean, you did working with Douglas. He took part in everything. He was always there, always making us laugh.
And one of the sort of the advantages of that story is that you got to film in Paris. Would you have done a lot of sort of wrecking beforehand? How much time did you actually spend there?
Michael and I went over I think we went for 2 days, and we found a lovely little cafe, and John Nathan Turner came with us, and we found this lovely little cafe, and we took amazing photographs of it, and we found a lovely art gallery for the art gallery and took amazing photos of that. And Michael he spoke French fluently, and he knew Paris like the back of his hand, so that was a huge advantage. I mean, the fact that he spoke French was just amazing. I mean, fluent French. He spoke was amazing. Yeah, absolutely. So he would have all these conversations and then tell me what I was supposed to be doing. But I got on with him so well. I mean, he'd been an actor before he'd gone into directing and things, and so he was great to work with. We had such fun together, and it was one of the best things about it was. And then when we got to Paris, it was a bank holiday, a holiday weekend, and the cafe was closed, so we had to find another cafe, and Nathan found that, and then the art gallery was closed, and so we just filmed the outside of it, and Tom and Lala Lloyd ran up to the door of this art gallery, and instead of just stopping, Tom being Tom, hit the door with his hand, and this burglar alarm went off. And Michael Hayes says on a tape I've seen, he said, "We did what we always did, ran." And we did. We just left this burglar alarm going in the middle of Paris again. And we never found out what happened. So, but we got it all done, and it looks beautiful in it. It really does. I mean, Michael got the picture. I mean, he was and we had a really good cameraman as well. It was just beautiful, yeah, and such fun because nobody had ever done Paris in Doctor Who. Nobody had ever thought of Paris in Doctor Who.
So taking everybody abroad, because I imagine location was done before studio, did that really bring everybody together when you then went into studio?
No, because we'd only got Lala and Tom, and Tom Chadbourne, who was the other character in it. And it's quite funny because on this same DVD, which I've been watching before I saw you, it's really funny because Julian Glover and, oh, what's the lady's name? Catherine Schell, are both complaining on it because they were told that they were going to go to Paris and then they didn't go. They only did the studio.
Am I right in thinking you've been at RADA with Julian, so that must have been quite nice to work with him again?
Yes, it was. It was. Yes, it was lovely. And also, I worked with when I worked for Associated Rediffusion, I did a program called The Dickie Henderson Show, and his wife, Isla Blair, was in that. And they came to dinner one night, and so I knew him quite well. So that, yes, it was nice.
And of course, one of the challenges of that story is aging David Graham's character to a skeleton. How complicated was that to achieve?
Very complicated. But it was quite clever. I mean, I think, I can't remember it was Michael Hayes or I who did the planning for that, but between us, we worked out that we could do it between other people's scenes. So then makeup would have as long as they needed, and then they could come and say to us, right, he's ready for the next bit. So I think that's how we did it. So it didn't take as long, but it was complicated. The most complicated thing was actually when it got to the skeleton, because the skeleton's head was obviously much smaller because it got no skin and things on it. It was obviously much smaller than Michael. And so it took us quite a while to get the skeleton inside his head. But we did it.
So that was all done sort of actually on the set. It wasn't CSO and then overlaid.
No, we did it live. And it was quite funny because at the beginning, I can remember him saying that he said that he would make a sort of agonized face. Michael said in my ear, do tell him he's going to have to keep it up. Ages and ages. It's going to have to do, each time we do a take, he's going to have to do the same agonized face. Yeah.
And the story also involves a lot of model shots, particularly of Scaroth's ship. As a production assistant, how involved would you have been with those?
Oh, I was there all the time at Ealing as well. Yeah, and when we did the space, the rocket at Ealing too. Yeah, but all the model stuff. Yeah, and we were quite lucky because at that time we used to have rehearsal rooms opposite North Acton Station, and the model place was in the road behind, the main road behind Acton. So I could actually walk round and have a look at how they were getting on with the models and see what was happening and have them explain it to me and everything. It was great. I did quite a lot of the production stuff, because when the director is actually directing the actors and all this stuff is being made while that's going on, quite often you had to do things which were quite exciting because they were things that, you were doing them on your own and making decisions on your own. And then going back and saying, do you think this is all right? But I think it will be. Depending on your director, whether you've got a lovely director who just lets you have your head. But it was good fun.
And would that have continued on to things like the radiophonic workshop and all the sort of post-production as well?
Yes, I was allowed to be in at all the post-production and put my, to say things if I felt yes, if I felt things were, yes. And the session musicians are just amazing. Musicians never, when musicians who do that sort of thing, who are just ordinary musicians who play in symphony orchestras and whatever the rest of the time, just have always amazed me, because they just look at the music, they play it, and then, the screen thing comes up, and if it doesn't quite fit, then they take a bit out and put a bit in, and and the radiophonic workshop was the same, lovely sort of noises, when noises that didn't sound as if they were on this earth. It was a really good, I was allowed to do an awful lot of. On Blake 7, I once did a whole music session on my own because the director was ill. It had to be done. The producer was there, but I did, because I'd worked on the show, I did most of it.
So was that part of the joy of the BBC, particularly at the time, that you just got on with it?
Yes. Yeah. Because you were there all the time, because you were, obviously all the music sessions and the radiophonic workshop sessions and the editing sessions came way after you'd done the production, but you could whiz into them because you were there. Nowadays, it's not, you're on to a different job. And I just learned so much doing that.
And outside of Doctor Who, you did actually also work with Patrick Troughton on, I think, a role that was quite soon after he left Doctor Who. How was that to work with him?
Oh, he was amazing. I think probably I was trying to think how old my son was at that time, because that's when I used to watch Doctor Who. Was opposite was with him before I worked, before I worked on it. And yes, I worked on one of the first things I did when I went to the Big was The Six Wives of Henry VIII, and I did 3 of those. I did Anne Boleyn, Catherine Howard, and Catherine Parr, but not as a production assistant. I did it as an assistant floor manager, which is like a stage manager. So I do all the props and things like that. And yes, I worked with him. And he was lovely. He's just such a nice person. And he's got all these children, well, not all these children. I worked with 2 of his children, David Troughton and another one, Sam. But both of them, I worked with one of them on Angels, which was a nursing series I did. And I can't remember the other one, but I worked with both his sons as well.
You worked at the BBC on so many well-known series. Is there one that was perhaps the most enjoyable or challenging?
Oh, the one that I remember very fondly is a series called Shoulder to Shoulder about the suffragettes, which I worked on with Verity Lambert and Waris Hussein, and that was such an amazing thing to do. And and I had an amazing experience of actually having to take over. I was the AFM on it, and then I had to take over as production, and that was really amazing. It was one of those things, when you see films and one of the actors is taken ill, and they go to this other actor and they say, "You've got to do the part," and well, that's how I felt. You've got to do the part, and you've got to do it now. That's how I did it.
And a lot of that would have been on location, am I right thinking?
It was, yes, in Halifax. Yes, it was quite fun. It was in Halifax, which was supposed to be Manchester, but Manchester didn't have any cobblestones, so I was. We had to take cobblestones round with us, even in Halifax, and put them on down. We had rubber cobblestones up so this high in the prop van to put down everywhere. And the other place I remember filming on that, which was there was a place called Midge Hole, which was a marvelous foresty bit. But as you can imagine, its name was quite true. And we got so bitten. I can't tell you, these midges bit us to pieces. But you put up with these things, don't you?
And of course, the joy of the BBC, I suppose, being staff at the time, is that you would do things like Doctor Who, Juliet Bravo, Shoulder to Shoulder. Did you have a particular preference for the genre, or is it all sort of much the same when you're working on it?
It's all much the same. I mean, I did episodes 27 and 28 of EastEnders. Those are my first EastEnders, which was really near the beginning. It was one of the first episodes which had Doc Cotton in it, and that was you know, it was really exciting in those days to be doing EastEnders. I mean, we had Michael Grade came out to see how we were doing it because it was all so new, and he wanted to see how his people were working. He was a great guy as a head of drama. He really was. He just was. He had us all to dinner in his 6th floor Erie, and he had 2 of everything: 2 production managers, 2 AFMs, 2 cameramen, 2 of everything. It was like the Noah's Ark, but we all had dinner with him. He was. So that was really good. It was EastEnders was fun to do in those days.
And that must present a whole different set of challenges to something like Doctor Who. You know, the time frame that you've got to produce an episode on EastEnders.
Oh yes, but those days it was only 2 a week, so it wasn't too bad. But it was, we did the lot, you know, all the outside stuff first, and then it was 2 or 3 weeks before we did our studios. So you know, it was really complicated getting the right actors in the right places, because you'd find some of them were doing something quite different for somebody else. So yeah, it had its moments. I did EastEnders. You know that terrible storm. Well, you're too young. You know that terrible storm in the 80s where all the trees were blown down and all the electricity went, and we woke up the next morning and nothing was running and nobody was doing anything and everything. And I drove up to Elstree and we did EastEnders that morning with all the stalls in the market had fallen down, and we put them all up again. We just, anything that was broken, we just pushed it out of the way, and we actually did the recording of out on the lot on that day after that big storm. We had to go around, driving to Elstree, had to go around trees and things that had fallen in the road. It's just amazing.
And having started off as an actress initially, how did that sort of forearm you in terms of production when dealing with actors? Was that particularly useful?
I think so. Because however nervous you feel in doing your job, whatever your job is, you'll never feel as nervous as they do, because actors, I think, feel much more nervous than anybody else who's working on a production. Because they're the face of the production. You know, you're working your guts out backstage, but they're the ones that people are going to see. They're the ones who are going to get the notices or not. So I do think, yes, I do. And I feel really, I remember doing a show once, I can't even remember what it was now, where this poor actress, she only had about 6 lines to say and she just couldn't get them right. And I think I was in tears practically before she was, because I just felt so sorry for her, you know.
And you were never tempted to go back into acting then?
No, never. The nearest I got on Shoulder to Shoulder, we had to do, we were at the brewery in South London, and I'm trying to think what the name of the brewery is. It's a big brewery in South London. Anyway, and we were doing the suffragettes being taken to jail in a horse-drawn Black Maria, and we had to sing the thingy flag is deepest red, the red flag, and because nobody else knew the words except me, I had to dress up and sit in this Black Maria in close up, and so that they could take a shot of someone actually singing the words, because none of the extras knew the words. So that's the last time I think I ever appeared on screen.
But nice to have those, odd moments that only you suppose know about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yes,
how had the BBC and I suppose production changed from when you started to when you retired? How had that developed over the years?
I took early retirement. I was only 54, 55. I took early retirement in 1992 because we were being offered a good deal. And it was quite obvious then that everything was just being shut down. And I mean, when I started, I mean, we were working with all those amazing Dennis Potter plays. I started working plays, and those amazing Dennis Potter plays were going on around us. And I mean, we did some wonderful, wonderful plays while I was there. Not just The Millionairess. We did a thing called Ross about Lawrence of Arabia. We did Peer Gynt. We did just amazing, amazing plays and things that you would never be allowed to do. I mean, 5-day studios, working from sort of 7 in the morning till 11 at night, and it was you just went on and did it, and it was just exciting, and people just never thought about how much it was. Well, they did think about how much it was costing, but it wasn't so important in those days. It was just, would we be able to do it? I mean, I remember doing I can't even remember what it was called now. I did a film with George Lazenby, with Ken Trod, and we had helicopter shots in it. I wanted to go up in the helicopter. They had to. It was really funny because, the cameraman on helicopter shots is always hanging out of the side of the helicopter and everything. And we got to the lunch break, and they said that the helicopter was going to have to go back to one of the aerodromes somewhere and refuel. And I said, "Oh, can I go? I really want to go in a helicopter. Can I go in a helicopter?" And the reviewer, and they said, "Yeah, of course you can. Really. You'll have to sit where the cameraman." I said, "I don't mind. I really don't mind. I just want to go and do it." And then Ken Trod decided he wanted to go, and of course, as being the producer, he got to go in helicopter. So I didn't. Really sad.
So you didn't manage it on any other production then?
No, I didn't. But not to do with television. But my family gave me a present of a helicopter trip over Sydney Harbour, because it happened to be in Australia for my 70th birthday. So I did get to go in a helicopter. Yeah. My son must have remembered how upset I was that I couldn't go up in this helicopter.
Oh. Well, on the note of fulfilling that seemingly lifelong ambition, I think it's a lovely point to say thank you very much for your time, Rosemary. It's been an absolute joy.
Pleasure. Thank you.